It started with a sealed red folder carried through a private Windsor corridor just after midnight, a folder no one was supposed to see until after King Charles's reign had ended. But when Princess Anne emerged from that meeting with a face described by insiders as ice-cold and final, palace aides knew something irreversible had happened. Because hidden inside that document was the one thing Prince Harry never expected to exist: Queen Elizabeth II's private final amendment to her will. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. What unfolded behind those ancient Windsor walls that night was not an ordinary legal review, nor another carefully managed royal procedure hidden beneath layers of palace silence. According to insiders familiar with the late-night gathering, Princess Anne had personally summoned senior royal legal advisors, trusted estate officials, and members of the palace trustee circle for what sources described as an urgent inheritance activation meeting tied directly to the Queen's private estate arrangements. Even among veteran staff members accustomed to secrecy, the atmosphere reportedly felt chillingly different. Doors remained sealed. Communication devices were allegedly restricted. Several longtime aides were instructed to leave entire corridors empty during the proceedings, while whispers about something called the Secondary Inheritance Protocol quietly spread among palace employees who had never heard those words spoken before. That alone was enough to send fear racing through royal circles, because within the monarchy, hidden protocols are never created without reason. Reports suggest the Queen herself ordered portions of this legal framework to remain locked until specific conditions inside the family had been met. Conditions that many insiders now believe were directly connected to the collapse of trust between Prince Harry and the institution he once represented. For years, rumors circulated that Queen Elizabeth feared the monarchy would one day face an internal fracture unlike anything seen since the abdication crisis generations earlier. But few imagined she had allegedly prepared private legal mechanisms, long before her death, to deal with those fears. Yet the most unsettling detail was not the hidden clause itself, it was the timing. According to palace administrative whispers now leaking into royal media circles, Prince Harry was reportedly informed only after activation procedures had already begun, meaning decisions tied to the Queen's secret amendment may have been finalized before he even understood what was happening. One insider described the moment as controlled devastation, claiming Harry believed the meeting would concern routine estate matters before realizing something far more personal had been set into motion behind closed doors. By the following morning, the emotional weight of the revelation was already rippling across Windsor. Staff reportedly noticed Anne behaving with an unusual level of emotional detachment, her tone colder, her interactions shorter, as though she had accepted a burden she never wanted but felt duty-bound to carry out. And then came the rumors that truly shook palace insiders to their core, claims that the Queen had anticipated this exact family divide years before it exploded publicly, quietly preparing final instructions designed not to punish anyone, but to protect the monarchy itself from what she allegedly feared was coming. But the real shock wasn't the existence of the hidden will, it was why the Queen allegedly hid it from Harry in the first place. For years, royal watchers believed Queen Elizabeth's estate arrangements had already been settled. But according to whispers now emerging from Windsor's old legal circles, one document remained untouched, locked away under instructions so strict that even senior courtiers reportedly feared discussing it aloud. And at the center of it all was a warning about loyalty, legacy, and the preservation of the crown. The deeper palace insiders began looking into the Queen's final years. The more unsettling the story became, because this was never described as a simple inheritance matter hidden inside dusty legal archives. According to sources familiar with long-standing royal protocols, the British monarchy has always treated royal wills differently from ordinary family estates, surrounding them with layers of secrecy, designed to protect both wealth and institutional stability. But insiders now claim Queen Elizabeth took those protections even further during the final phase of her reign, quietly revising sensitive estate directives while the monarchy itself was entering one of the most emotionally explosive periods in modern royal history. By the time Harry and Meghan stepped away from royal duties, tensions inside palace walls were already described as deeply fractured. Publicly, the institution attempted to project calm restraint. Privately, however, whispers of internal panic allegedly spread through senior royal households as advisors worried about reputational damage, constitutional complications, and the long-term survival of public trust in the crown itself. It was during that period, according to reports now resurfacing from old Windsor legal channels, that the Queen allegedly began strengthening confidential inheritance mechanisms tied not just to money, but to access, authority, and symbolic royal continuity. Sources claim she feared that personal grievances spilling into public life could eventually weaken the monarchy in ways previous generations never imagined. And that fear, insiders believe, changed everything. Multiple royal commentators have suggested the Queen became increasingly focused on what she privately called institutional stability during her final years, particularly after the succession drama surrounding interviews, memoirs, and accusations began dominating headlines worldwide. Palace insiders now allege that certain royal residences, private trusts, and even heirloom protections were quietly reviewed behind closed doors, as part of a broader strategy designed to preserve what the Queen believed must remain untouched, regardless of family conflict. The most revealing detail, however, was Princess Anne's role inside the entire arrangement. According to those familiar with the late Queen's deepest circle of trust, Anne was not simply informed about the confidential directives. She was allegedly entrusted with oversight responsibilities, connected directly to the hidden framework itself. That decision alone speaks volumes about how seriously the Queen viewed the matter, because Anne's reputation inside palace operations has long been tied to discipline, loyalty, and emotional resilience. Insiders describe her as the one royal capable of separating family heartbreak from institutional duty without hesitation. Reports now suggest Prince William may also have been quietly briefed long before Harry ever knew the hidden clause existed, a revelation that has only intensified speculation surrounding how far the Queen's private preparations actually extended. Some believe the undisclosed amendment involved restrictions tied to royal properties, ceremonial heirlooms, or confidential trust structures connected to the future of the monarchy under William's reign. Others claim the issue became dramatically more urgent after Harry's memoir and public interviews deepened concerns within palace circles about loyalty, confidentiality, and the irreversible erosion of trust. And while much remains hidden beneath layers of royal silence, one thing has become painfully clear to those watching the story unfold: the Queen may have spent her final years preparing for a family rupture she feared could one day reshape the monarchy forever. But while the public believed the family divide was already beyond repair, Anne was preparing to reveal something that would change the balance of power forever. According to multiple palace sources, the moment Prince Harry finally heard the contents of the Queen's hidden directive, the room fell completely silent. What began as a confidential legal briefing reportedly spiraled into disbelief, anger, and emotional collapse, as Harry realized the decision had been years in the making, and that the Queen herself may have anticipated every step of the royal fallout long before it unfolded publicly. By that point, the tension surrounding the sealed amendment had already spread through royal circles like a slow-moving storm. Yet nothing prepared insiders for the emotional force of Harry's alleged reaction once the full meaning behind the document became clear. Reports suggest the Duke of Sussex was not informed directly by King Charles or Prince William, but instead through carefully arranged legal intermediaries operating under confidential estate procedures tied to the late Queen's instructions. That detail alone reportedly cut deeply because, according to palace insiders, Harry immediately understood what it symbolized. This was no longer simply a private family disagreement hidden beneath palace diplomacy. This was institutional enforcement. Cold. Deliberate. Final. Sources familiar with the meeting claim portions of the Queen's hidden instructions directly affected inheritance expectations connected to symbolic royal access, long-term privileges, and future rights tied to the monarchy's inner structure. While exact details remain heavily guarded, insiders now whisper that the Queen allegedly linked certain protections and privileges to active duty, loyalty to the institution, and continued participation inside the royal framework itself. To Harry, according to those close to the fallout, the realization reportedly felt devastating, because it suggested the Queen had not viewed royal status as unconditional family entitlement, but as something permanently tied to service and trust. The emotional weight of that possibility allegedly shattered assumptions Harry had carried for years. But the deeper wound came moments later when he reportedly learned who held enforcement authority over the hidden directive. Not King Charles, not palace courtiers. Princess Anne. Sources claim Harry was visibly stunned by the revelation because Anne's involvement signaled something far more serious than temporary royal discipline. Anne represented the monarchy's uncompromising old guard, the faction within the institution believed to place duty above emotion regardless of personal cost. Insiders now claim the Queen specifically entrusted Anne with oversight because she knew her daughter would never bend under pressure, public outrage, or emotional confrontation. According to whispers emerging from royal legal circles, that realization transformed the atmosphere instantly. One palace source described the emotional collapse that followed as deeply personal, explaining that Harry allegedly saw the Queen's decision not merely as a legal restriction, but as evidence she may have quietly lost confidence in him long before her death. The timing made everything even worse. The interviews, the memoir, the public accusations, the growing hostility between royal households. All of it suddenly appeared through an entirely different lens, as if the Queen had anticipated years earlier that the divide inside the family would eventually become irreversible. Reports suggest tensions between Harry and William intensified almost immediately afterward, with insiders claiming William maintained a cold, restrained silence that only deepened Harry's anger and emotional isolation. Palace officials allegedly became terrified details would leak publicly because they feared the story would trigger another wave of international scrutiny capable of reopening every unresolved wound surrounding the royal split. And beneath all the silence, one haunting question reportedly lingered inside Windsor itself. If the Queen truly prepared this hidden directive years in advance, then how long had she quietly feared this moment was coming? But Harry's reaction was only the beginning, because the deeper meaning behind the Queen's decision carried consequences far beyond money or titles. Princess Anne had spent decades protecting the monarchy from scandals, fractures, and internal wars, but insiders now believe this was the single hardest responsibility ever placed on her shoulders. Because revealing the Queen's final hidden wishes did not simply risk family outrage. It threatened to expose how deeply the late monarch feared the crown itself could one day be weakened from within. For years, Anne had quietly earned a reputation inside palace walls that bordered on legendary. While other senior royals captured headlines, public fascination, or media sympathy, Anne became something far more dangerous and far more respected within the institution itself, the monarchy's enforcer. Palace staff allegedly trusted her judgment above almost anyone else, because she was known for operating without emotional spectacle, without hesitation, and without concern for public approval. According to royal insiders, Queen Elizabeth valued that quality deeply during the final years of her reign, especially as tensions surrounding Harry and Meghan escalated into a crisis that threatened not only family relationships, but the monarchy's long-term authority. Reports now suggest the Queen became increasingly convinced that emotional compromise alone would not protect the institution after her death. She needed someone capable of carrying out difficult decisions even if those decisions fractured the family forever. And in the Queen's eyes, insiders claim, only Anne possessed the emotional discipline required to shoulder that burden. Multiple palace sources now allege that Elizabeth specifically selected Anne to oversee the most sensitive legacy matters tied to the hidden directive, because she trusted her daughter's loyalty to the crown above personal sentiment. That trust was not built overnight. It was forged across decades of duty, sacrifice, and relentless institutional discipline. Anne had spent her entire life watching the monarchy survive scandals, betrayals, divorces, public outrage, and generational upheaval. She understood something many others inside the royal family struggled to accept. Survival often demanded emotional brutality. According to whispers emerging from Windsor's inner circles, legal advisors reportedly urged extreme caution before activating the hidden procedures connected to the Queen's sealed amendment. Some allegedly feared the emotional consequences could trigger permanent damage between Harry and the rest of the family. Others worried that public exposure of the directive would unleash another international firestorm capable of destabilizing the monarchy during one of its most fragile transitions in modern history. But once the legal process officially began, insiders describe Anne as completely unmovable. One palace source claimed she treated the activation not as a family disagreement, but as an institutional obligation she had sworn to fulfill on behalf of the Queen herself. That distinction changed everything. Because according to those close to the unfolding crisis, Anne never viewed the hidden directive as punishment. She allegedly viewed it as protection. Protection of continuity. Protection of succession. Protection of the monarchy's future under William. And perhaps most haunting of all, protection against wounds the Queen feared would only deepen after her death. The emotional strain reportedly reached King Charles as well. Palace insiders now suggest the king privately struggled with the fallout surrounding Harry, particularly as tensions between father and son grew colder in the aftermath of the revelation. Yet even Charles, according to sources familiar with palace discussions, allegedly understood why the Queen placed responsibility in Anne's hands rather than his own. Anne could withstand the emotional backlash in ways Charles could not. Royal commentators increasingly began framing Anne's actions through one painful phrase repeated quietly across palace circles: duty over family emotion. And the more insiders reflected on the Queen's final years, the more terrifying that phrase became. Because if Elizabeth trusted Anne to enforce hidden protections after her death, then perhaps the Queen feared far more instability inside the monarchy than the public ever realized. But as the contents of the hidden will spread quietly through palace circles, another terrifying question began to emerge. What else had the Queen prepared in secret? The atmosphere inside royal circles reportedly changed almost overnight. Conversations stopped when certain names entered the room. Staff members were suddenly reassigned. Long-standing communication channels quietly froze. And according to insiders familiar with Windsor's internal operations, the Queen's hidden directive triggered a level of institutional panic not seen since the aftermath of Princess Diana's death. What had once been treated as painful but manageable family tension suddenly transformed into something colder, deeper, and far more dangerous. Palace insiders now claim the revelations surrounding the Queen's hidden amendment shattered the fragile balance that had existed between competing factions inside the monarchy for years. On one side stood what royal commentators increasingly described as the old guard, senior figures fiercely loyal to the institution above all else, many of whom quietly believed the monarchy had already sacrificed too much stability in its attempts to contain public conflict. On the other side were the remaining sympathizers, who still hoped some form of reconciliation with Harry could eventually be salvaged before the divide became permanent. But after Anne's activation of the hidden directive, insiders say those hopes began collapsing rapidly behind palace walls. Reports soon emerged of confidential strategy meetings involving Prince William, Princess Anne, and senior royal advisors operating under unusually strict secrecy protocols. According to sources familiar with Windsor operations, discussions were no longer focused solely on emotional family repair, but on future institutional restructuring. That distinction terrified many within royal circles because it suggested the monarchy had begun preparing not for reconciliation, but for long-term separation. Speculation intensified that inheritance frameworks tied to symbolic royal assets, ceremonial privileges, and future trust protections may now be permanently altered as a direct consequence of the Queen's final instructions. The possibility alone sent shockwaves through both royal staff and media insiders, desperate to uncover what had truly been hidden inside the sealed directive. Journalists reportedly began contacting former palace employees, estate officials, and legal observers searching for fragments of information that could explain why the Queen considered such extraordinary measures necessary. And with every new rumor, the sense of unease inside Windsor reportedly deepened. Some royal historians quietly suggested the Queen's actions reflected a final attempt to preserve continuity during a moment of unprecedented institutional vulnerability. Others described the move as a silent constitutional warning, left behind by a monarch who feared emotional fractures within the family could eventually destabilize public faith in the crown itself. But while analysts debated the political meaning behind the hidden directive, the emotional consequences surrounding Harry reportedly became increasingly severe. Palace insiders claimed the Duke of Sussex grew more isolated after learning the truth, emotionally cut off not only from key members of the institution, but from the final sense of certainty he may have still carried about his place within the royal legacy. According to whispers emerging from royal social circles, several private communication efforts allegedly stalled almost immediately after the revelation, with some aides fearing even minor misunderstandings could now trigger another catastrophic public rupture. What once seemed like a deeply wounded family relationship now reportedly felt like something colder and more permanent. A breakdown of trust so profound that even senior palace officials no longer knew whether repair was truly possible. And perhaps most chilling of all was the growing realization spreading quietly through Windsor itself. If the Queen prepared hidden legal protections years before her death, then the monarchy's deepest fears about internal collapse may have begun long before the world ever noticed the cracks. But the final and most devastating revelation had still not been spoken aloud, and when it finally surfaced, it changed how people viewed the Queen's final years forever. Behind the legal language, sealed directives, and whispered palace meetings, insiders now believe Queen Elizabeth's hidden will contain something far more personal than anyone realized. Fear. Not fear for herself, but fear for what would happen to the monarchy after she was gone. And according to those closest to the institution, that fear shaped every decision she made in silence during her final years. The deeper palace figures began reflecting on the Queen's final chapter, the more haunting the entire story became. Because for most of her reign, Elizabeth II had survived crises by relying on patience, restraint, and an almost supernatural ability to absorb chaos without allowing it to destroy the institution around her. She endured divorces, scandals, political upheavals, public anger, and devastating family tragedies, while still maintaining the image of continuity the monarchy depended upon. But insiders now claim something changed during the last years of her life. The fracture surrounding Harry and Meghan reportedly forced the Queen to confront a possibility she had spent decades trying to avoid: that the greatest threat to the monarchy might not come from politics, the press, or public unrest, but from within her own family. According to palace sources, Elizabeth became increasingly worried about institutional instability as tensions escalated behind closed doors. The public saw headlines, interviews, and official statements. But inside royal circles, aides allegedly witnessed a monarch quietly recalculating the future of the crown itself. Harry and Meghan's departure reportedly reshaped palace strategy at the highest levels, forcing senior advisors to begin discussing continuity plans, inheritance protections, and public trust in ways they never anticipated while the Queen was still alive. What terrified many insiders was not simply the family conflict, but the possibility that repeated public attacks on the monarchy could permanently weaken the mystique, unity, and authority the institution depended upon to survive. That fear, according to royal commentators, may explain why the Queen allegedly designed the hidden directive not as revenge, but as a final protective shield around the monarchy's future under William. Sources close to palace operations now speculate the sealed amendment was carefully structured to reinforce continuity during the coming transition between generations, ensuring that symbolic royal authority remained tied to service, stability, and institutional responsibility rather than emotional entitlement alone. The emotional cost of that decision, however, appears to have weighed heavily on everyone involved. Insiders increasingly describe the Queen's final years as quietly strategic, a phrase that continues to send chills through royal observers, because it suggests Elizabeth may have spent her final period preparing for conflicts she never wanted to see become reality. And no one allegedly carried that burden more heavily than Princess Anne. According to whispers from Windsor's inner circles, Anne understood the emotional consequences of the hidden directive long before the rest of the family became aware of it. Yet she reportedly accepted the responsibility anyway, because she believed protecting the monarchy mattered more than preserving temporary emotional peace. That belief reflected the Queen's own lifelong philosophy of duty, the idea that personal pain must sometimes be endured to preserve something larger than oneself. Royal commentators now argue the hidden directive was not merely a legal document, but a reflection of how Elizabeth viewed monarchy itself, not as a family possession, but as a fragile institution entrusted to each generation for protection. And perhaps that is what makes the story so emotionally devastating. Because beneath all the secrecy, silence, and legal complexity was an aging queen allegedly trying to prevent the family she loved from becoming the force that ultimately weakened the crown she spent her entire life defending. But even after the hidden will surfaced, one mystery still haunted everyone inside the palace. Why had the Queen waited so long to reveal it? While headlines focused on Harry's reported collapse, palace insiders were watching someone else even more closely: Prince William. Because according to those familiar with the unfolding crisis, William's silence after Anne's revelation was not accidental. It was calculated, controlled, and perhaps the clearest sign yet that the future king had already accepted a painful truth about his brother long before the rest of the world caught up. In many ways, insiders now believe William's reaction revealed more about the monarchy's future than the hidden directive itself. While Harry's emotional response reportedly shook palace circles, William allegedly responded with a restraint that many aides described as deeply unsettling. There were no public statements, no emotional interventions, no visible attempts to soften the fallout. According to sources familiar with internal discussions, the Prince of Wales had already been privately briefed long before the legal activation became known to the wider family, meaning the revelation that devastated Harry had likely been weighing silently on William for months, perhaps even years. That realization changed how palace observers interpreted his silence. It no longer looked passive. It looked prepared. Multiple insiders now claim William quietly supported Anne's enforcement position from the beginning, not because he lacked emotional attachment to his brother, but because he increasingly believed the survival of the institution demanded painful clarity. According to royal aides, years of public conflict, media warfare, memoir accusations, and institutional distrust had slowly transformed William's thinking about the future of the monarchy. The emotional bond between the brothers, once described as unbreakable after the loss of Princess Diana, reportedly deteriorated under the crushing weight of betrayal, resentment, and competing visions of royal life. By the time the Queen's hidden directive surfaced, insiders say William no longer viewed the crisis as a temporary family rupture waiting to heal naturally with time. He allegedly saw it as a defining institutional crossroads. That belief reportedly intensified the emotional strain between the brothers to devastating levels. Sources close to palace operations now suggest several private attempts at rebuilding communication had already failed long before Anne activated the hidden directive. And once the Queen's final instructions became impossible to ignore, the atmosphere between William and Harry allegedly shifted from wounded emotion into something colder and more formal. One palace insider described the mood as cold professionalism, a phrase repeated quietly through royal circles in the days that followed. According to those familiar with the situation, discussions involving Harry were increasingly handled through advisors, legal representatives, and tightly managed communication channels rather than direct emotional dialogue between family members. Behind the scenes, Catherine reportedly played a stabilizing role during the crisis, helping maintain calm inside William's household, while emotional pressure surrounding the monarchy intensified. Insiders claim she understood the personal devastation William was carrying privately, particularly as he struggled to balance lingering love for his brother against growing fears about the monarchy's future stability. That tension reportedly haunted nearly every decision surrounding the unfolding crisis. Royal commentators now argue William's silence reflected a painful acceptance that reconciliation alone could no longer guide royal strategy if institutional survival was at stake. And perhaps that realization marked the true beginning of a new royal era. Because according to palace insiders, the monarchy emerging after the hidden directive no longer resembled the softer, emotionally flexible institution many once hoped William would eventually lead. Instead, it appeared increasingly shaped by the same philosophy Queen Elizabeth and Princess Anne had quietly followed for decades. Duty first, survival second, emotion last. The emotional consequences of that transformation may continue haunting Windsor for years to come. And as insiders looked toward the monarchy's uncertain future, one truth became impossible to escape: the hidden directive was never merely about inheritance. It was about preparing the crown for a world where trust inside the family itself could no longer be guaranteed. And as Windsor entered this new chapter, one final realization became impossible to ignore. The Queen's hidden will may have been her last attempt to save the crown from the family itself. In the end, the hidden will was never just about inheritance. It was about control, trust, survival, and the terrifying burden of protecting a 1,000-year-old institution from collapse. And now, as Princess Anne stands at the center of the storm the Queen left behind, the monarchy faces a painful reality. Elizabeth II may have understood the coming fracture long before anyone else dared admit it aloud. As the dust slowly settled across Windsor, one truth became impossible to deny. The Queen's final hidden directive was never designed simply to reward one person or punish another. According to palace insiders, its deeper purpose was preservation. Preservation of continuity. Preservation of authority. Preservation of a monarchy Elizabeth had spent her entire life protecting through wars, scandals, betrayals, and generational upheaval. Those closest to the institution now believe the late queen recognized something deeply unsettling during her final years. That the greatest danger facing the crown was no longer external criticism, political unrest, or media attacks. It was the slow collapse of trust within the royal family itself. And rather than allowing emotional hesitation to leave the monarchy vulnerable after her death, she allegedly chose to act in silence, preparing mechanisms she believed would protect the institution long after she was gone. That decision changed everything. Princess Anne emerged from the crisis not as a villain, nor as a cold-hearted enforcer, but as the final guardian of the Queen's philosophy of duty. According to royal commentators, Anne understood the emotional devastation her actions would trigger, yet carried out the responsibility anyway, because she believed loyalty to the crown demanded sacrifice at the highest personal level. In many ways, insiders say Anne became the living symbol of the monarchy's oldest principle, that individual pain must sometimes be endured to preserve the institution for future generations. Meanwhile, Harry's emotional collapse reportedly represented something far larger than one man's heartbreak. It symbolized the deeper fracture tearing through the House of Windsor itself, the tragic collision between personal freedom and inherited responsibility, between emotional truth and institutional survival. What once appeared to be a temporary royal family conflict now looked, to many observers, like a permanent transformation of the monarchy's internal identity. And standing quietly at the center of that transformation was Prince William. Sources close to palace operations increasingly describe him as the future guardian of the crown, a future king shaped not by idealism alone, but by painful lessons surrounding trust, loyalty, and sacrifice. The emotional warmth many once associated with the younger princes has reportedly given way to something more restrained, more cautious, and far more protective of institutional stability. Some royal historians now argue the hidden directive may ultimately define William's future reign before it has even begun, because it forced the monarchy to confront questions it had avoided for years. What matters more, family unity or institutional survival? Compassion or continuity? Emotion or duty? The Queen's final actions appeared to answer those questions with devastating clarity. The crown, according to the philosophy Elizabeth allegedly carried until her final days, survives only when those entrusted with protecting it are willing to make impossible choices. And yet, beneath all the legal complexity and royal protocol, the story remains profoundly human. A mother, a grandmother, a monarch, a family struggling beneath the crushing weight of history, expectation, betrayal, and legacy. Perhaps that is why the ending feels so haunting. Because even after the hidden will surfaced, even after the directives were enforced, and the silence inside Windsor deepened, one painful reality remained untouched. Some wounds inside the royal family may never fully heal. Some betrayals leave scars too deep for reconciliation. And some decisions, once made in the name of duty, echo across generations forever. Because in the House of Windsor, secrets are never truly buried. And sometimes the final words of a queen can reshape the future long after her voice has fallen silent. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.